Today, we're delighted to have a guest, Damilola Aderibigbe, who is currently studying for his Ph.D. At the University of Florida. Is that right?
Florida
At
State University.
Florida State University. He is the winner of the Brittingham Prize from the University of Wisconsin, which is a major poetry prize. And his first book has just come out from the University of Wisconsin. He is a poet from Lagos, Nigeria. And we welcome you, Dami, to this class.
Yeah,
It's great to have you here.
yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm excited and I'm looking forward to just talking to your students and the general public as the case.
Yes. So obviously you grew up in Lagos, and you were immersed in contemporary and modern Nigerian and African literature. Tell us a little bit about the scene there, Dami.
Yeah, it's pretty active. Like the literary scene in Nigeria, it's pretty active. I really don't know much about. I mean, like I've only read about like the African the literary scenes in other African country. Like I haven't really experienced it, but that in Nigeria I've experienced because I never left Nigeria until I came to the United States via Morocco. But the Nigerian literary scene is pretty active in the sense that there are literary festivals all over the country. Like they're like and so many writers help other writers in every front. It's just so amazing, and yeah, which I was kind of like fortunate to be a part of. But yeah, it's very active, but I have to say though, in terms of writing right now, it's changing. And this owes much to the influence of American poetry, so to say, because so many of them right now, I mean, the younger writers of my generation, and so many writers of my generation now have access to American poetry like never before. As such, it's kind of like you can see the influence in their writing. Unlike, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there are certain themes that people write about now that people wouldn't write about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like sexuality, themes around like household, domestic things, and like mostly visceral poetry. Like you didn't used to see that. I mean, a lot of some African poets used to do that before. I don't want to attribute all of it to American poetry, but it's not as much as it is now. So you have the younger writers, they aren't scared to write about how they feel. So which is like a change, and it's still changing.
I see. And that's interesting. So it's American poetry that has opened a lot of those doors, you think? Why
Yeah.
American?
So exactly, thank you. So that's because like as it is right now, it's not like Americans are like the best in terms of writing or literature. I'm not like no value judgment intended, but what I'm just saying is that America seems like like everything is driven by capitalism now in this currently. So America seems like the epicenter of the literary world and market. So many people are kind of like trying to get in, and so they modify their work. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect is that so many literary journals are based in America. So many of these writers have access to these literary journals now via the internet and every other thing. So they get, like they just get more American poetry than others.
That's so interesting that there's a
Yeah.
kind of commercial aspect to this too.
Aspect to it, yeah. So which also influences the creative aspects. Mm-hmm. And that's not all. Like there's also an important aspect you mentioned that, like, I wouldn't say that American poetry opened those stories. I think that those stories were there before. People were not just confident enough to write about them because they thought that there weren't market for them. Like, I'll take myself for example, like writing, like influenced by the likes of Jack Mapanje and, who is based in the UK. But I wanted to sound like someone like, say, Wale Soyinka, who is like, one of our heroes. He's one of my heroes. He's like my childhood hero. But, my poetry just never sounded like him until, until I came across the likes of Jack Mapanje via the internet, as funny as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, so things like that, even though it's not based in America, it's based in the UK. So I feel like so many Nigerian poets also, they sort of found or still find their Jack Mapanjes on, via American poetry. So
I think people sometimes forget about the fact that Nigeria is such a large and vibrant and diverse country.
yes,
You mentioned Wole Soyinka, Nobel Prize winner, and Chinua Achebe,
yeah,
also a great Nigerian writer. So there's an enormously rich tradition in Nigeria.
Christopher Kibo, another great poet from that generation. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of them. J.P. Clark, we have so many of them. Yeah, Nigeria is pretty, we have like rich literary tradition. Even before, these writers, like, we had the praise singers, the people who never wrote, this poetry, but they sang this poetry, like, so back then. So, there's a lot of that. Yes.
And so you mentioned the oral tradition and that part of it. How does that affect your work?
It's pretty funny because I feel like, I'm from that generation, like someone like my grandmother, for example, right? Like even my mom, right from when we were like kids, they used to like, whenever I was mad or my sister or I just sort of not, feeling it or not feeling that well and all that, they sing, they sort of sing what we call oriki, which is like your praise song, they just sing and it's poetic. It's really, really poetic, in terms of, how, in terms of syntax and, like imagery, like the metaphors in it, like, but it's in the Yoruba language. So, all of that, just growing up, you already have that in your head and, you just think like that. And now coming across other poets on the page, it just sort of like, it just sort of like magnifies what you already had, before. So in this case, what I already had. So, like, definitely oral tradition indirectly influenced and still influences my work.
I see. And of course, you've now been in the United States for some years. You did your MFA at Boston College with Robert Pinsky, former poet, Boston University, with poet laureate Robert Pinsky. What was that like in terms of the contrast, or how did the American scene influence you after having come from Lagos?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that, I've always been someone who, and I think that's one of the things I was trying to explain, like initially when I talked about the Nigerian poet and the Nigerian literary scene, Kenyan. Like, I've always read American poetry even while in Nigeria, via my phone, my BlackBerry phone I had then, and, like through some, journals and books. So it sort of didn't change much in the sense that I, coming to America, it was just more or less like now just occupying somewhere that you like, physically occupying somewhere that you, a place or a space, sorry, that you're occupying virtually. So, just coming in there. And I mean, in terms of, learning about, poetry and all that, I really learned a lot from Robert, from Carl Ketchway, and Maggie Dietz. I really learned about craft, and, I improved in terms of, like poetry writing and all that. So, but in terms of the American literary scene, it didn't like change much because I was already reading about some of these people, in Nigeria before coming here. So yeah, it didn't change much.
You mentioned earlier a poet who's influenced you, Jack Mapanje.
Yes.
Tell us about his work.
Jack Mapanje's work is pretty, like, it's steep in like the African literary tradition. Like, Jack Mapanje is really seriously influenced by, the oral tradition, like, and praise poetry. So, which is, something that's very interesting. And in addition to that, like, his imagery and, like his metaphors are so like just original and very African, but like in a way that is, like it's specific, but there's also a sort of universality in the specificity of his of his imageries and like metaphors. At least that's how I read it. Maybe due to the proximity of of me being in Nigerian and Jack Mapanje being Malawian, probably because of that closeness. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but that's how I see it. It's my worldview, so, and that's the best way I can explain it. So, but his poetry is really original, and his language is rich and laid back. I read Jack Mapanje almost every single week.
Wow. Yes. Wow. Have you ever met him or corresponded?
No, I've never met him. I've never corresponded with him. I don't know why. I just haven't corresponded with him yet, which I hope, someday, because he came to Brown University a couple of years ago, but I didn't know until he left.
I see.
So Rhode Island, I would have probably, I would have probably went there I'd have probably, just gone to see him.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So.
Your book, How the End First Showed, has come out in 2019. Is that right?
2018, the end of 2018.
Yeah, and I'd love to have you share a few poems from that book.
Yeah, a second. Yes, thank you. So this is it, and that's the cover. So, I'm just gonna share a couple of poems, like 2 short poems, not to take our time. So How the End First Showed is sort of like it's just generally this book is just about deals a lot with domestic abuse and also the deaths of a parent. So it deals with violence in different forms. So, but it's just like, as a child, not being able to do anything to stop these things. So this book is just my way of stepping into the past to try to correct some things that I couldn't, which I don't think is possible, but it's just my own way of looking at it. So I'll just read a couple of poems there. So, and yeah, I'll read this. So this is from the point of view of a grandmother, like addressed to the grandson. Okay. Love. And one more thing I should say is that, like, I code switch a lot because my first language is Yoruba. So I write, also I infuse Yoruba words in my poetry a lot. Love. Shiori, this is how your grandfather and I loved. So much in love. In his rickety inheritance, from home we drove to Bar Beach every evening, where we either made love or watched a liquid god rise and fall in his salted glory. Each time, there were those who seemed to be learning if love was a type of animal that deserved this much attention. They turned their faces to the gray suited sky, asking, "Dear love, are you real or just something someone somewhere gave a face to?" Back to those of us who believed in the animal called love. Damn, we were about your age, clenching the beach in our palms, young enough to believe those sands were tiny children of love. So I'll just read one more. I'll just read Tiredness. Vehicles hoot and honk, The deadlocked traffic jam sputters smoke into the afternoon. Curses and pleas sprayed on the road like pollution. Afternoon gathers around a downfall bus. Two men struggle to pull open the door. A man pours his folded fist on a woman like stones. I stand outside the bus, looking. My father slaps my mother with the back of his hands. My mother's lips are broken. Two men hold up my father's hands. His knuckles painted with blood. Mother lies on the ground, tired of rising after every fall. Thank you.
Damilola Aderibigbe, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on your success.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We look forward to continuing to read your work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And, it's been so much, like it's been a blessing, so to say. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.